Welcome to the skill most men refuse to master. Not because it's difficult, because it requires you to face an uncomfortable truth. You're losing battles every single day, at work, in relationships, in negotiations, that determine your future, and you don't even know you're fighting. The ancient samurai understood something modern men have forgotten. Words are weapons, sharper than steel, more permanent than scars. They trained for verbal combat with the same intensity they trained with the blade, because they knew the argument you lose today becomes the contract you sign tomorrow. The debate you avoid becomes the opportunity someone else seizes. This isn't about being aggressive. It's about being dangerous. There's a difference. Unquote. Aggressive men make noise. Dangerous men make impact. By the time we're done, you'll understand the hidden architecture of persuasion, the psychology of dominance through language, the art of dismantling opponents without raising your voice. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Fundamental Misconception. Most men think verbal conflict is about who talks loudest. Wrong. It's about who controls the frame. Frame control is the invisible battlefield where all verbal wars are won or lost before the first word is spoken. The frame is the context, the assumed reality, the rules of engagement that both parties accept without questioning. He who controls the frame controls the outcome. Think about the last argument you lost. You probably had better facts, stronger logic, more evidence. Us. None of it mattered. Because your opponent controlled the frame, they determined what the argument was about, what counted as valid evidence, what the victory condition even was. You were playing chess. They changed it to poker, and you didn't notice until you'd already lost. The samurai had a concept, sen. It means initiative. The warrior who achieves sen dictates the rhythm of combat, forces the opponent into reactive mode, controls when engagement begins and ends. Verbal warfare is identical. When someone attacks your position, your instinct is to defend it. That's exactly what they want. Defense means you've accepted their frame, their terms, their battlefield. The master does something different. He reframes. You're saying I'm wrong about this strategy. No. I'm saying you're asking the wrong question entirely. See what happened? He didn't defend his position. He elevated the conversation, made the original attack irrelevant by changing the terrain. This is the first law of verbal war. Never fight on ground your opponent chooses. Modern neuroscience validates what the samurai knew intuitively. When someone accepts your framing of reality, you've bypassed their rational defenses entirely. Their brain begins processing information through your lens, seeing what you want them to see, missing what you want them to miss. Political strategists exploit this constantly. The debate isn't, should we spend tax money on this program? It's, do you support helping struggling families or not? Different frame, different emotional territory, different outcome. But here's what most people miss about frame control. It's not about deception, it's about clarity. The most powerful frame is often the most truthful one. The perspective that cuts through confusion and reveals what actually matters. When you master reframing, you don't manipulate, you illuminate. You show people what they couldn't see before, not through trickery, through precision. Chapter 2. The Samurai's Silence. In 1645, the swordsman Miyamoto Musashi wrote about the power of the void, the space between attacks, the silence that unnerves opponents more than any strike. Most men talk too much. They think verbal dominance means verbal volume, constant pressure, relentless argumentation. They're wrong. The masters understood. Silence is a weapon. Watch a skilled negotiator. He makes his point, then stops, doesn't fill the gap, doesn't soften the blow, doesn't apologize for clarity. He waits. The silence creates pressure. The other person feels compelled to fill it. And when they do, they reveal things they intended to hide. Their true position, their weaknesses, their desperation. This is tactical silence, different from passive quiet. It's active, intentional, weaponized. Try this experiment. Next time someone makes an unreasonable demand, don't immediately argue. Just look at them. Let the silence expand. Watch what happens. They'll start negotiating with themselves. Well, I suppose we could. Or, of course, if that's not possible. You didn't concede anything. You didn't argue. You just refused to fill their silence with your weakness. The second law of verbal war. The person most comfortable with silence controls the interaction. But silence has another function. It forces calibration. When you stop talking, you start observing. Reading micro-expressions, noticing hesitation, detecting incongruence between words and body language. Most men are so focused on what they're going to say next that they miss everything their opponent is actually communicating. The eyes that dart left when discussing timelines. The tension in shoulders when certain topics arise. The shift in breathing when you mention specific names. These signals tell you where the weakness is, where the leverage lives, what they're actually afraid of. Professional interrogators know this. They don't break suspects through aggressive questioning. They break them through strategic silence. The suspect talks to fill the void, and talks, until they've given away everything. But here's the sophisticated understanding. Silence isn't just about what you don't say. It's about what you make them say. The master uses silence to create psychological pressure that forces revelation. So that's your final offer? Silence. I mean, there might be some flexibility. You didn't negotiate. You didn't counteroffer. You didn't argue. You just refused to accept their frame, and they collapsed it themselves. This requires emotional discipline. Your instinct when someone makes an absurd statement is to immediately correct them, explain why they're wrong, present your superior logic. Resist. Let the statement hang in the air. Let them hear how it sounds. Let them convince themselves. Often they will. The ancient texts speak of the gap, the pause, the interval, not emptiness, pregnant possibility. In tea ceremony, in combat, in dialogue, the space where transformation happens. Master the silence. Master the war. Chapter 3. Precision language as blade work. The samurai spent decades perfecting each sword movement, not because it looked good, because millimeters determined life or death. Language requires the same precision. Every word is a choice. Every choice has consequences. Most men wield language like a club when they need a scalpel. Consider the difference. I disagree with your approach. Versus, your approach optimizes for speed while sacrificing accuracy. In this context, accuracy determines survival. So while I respect the intent, the execution guarantees failure. The first statement invites argument. The second statement presents reality. One is opinion. The other is architecture. This is the third law of verbal war. Vagueness is vulnerability. When your language lacks precision, opponents have room to maneuver. They can reinterpret, deflect, claim, misunderstanding. Unquote. But when your language is surgical, it cuts clean. No wiggle room, no ambiguity, no escape. We need to improve our process. Is weak. We're losing 23% of qualified leads in the handoff between sales and fulfillment, costing us $400K quarterly. Is strong. See the difference? One invites debate about whether improvement is needed. The other presents a problem so specific that the only question is how to solve it. Precision also means eliminating verbal tics that signal weakness. I think maybe we should consider. Delete I think. Delete maybe. Delete consider. We should implement this immediately. Direct, clear, confident, not arrogant. Precise. The samurai concept of hyoshi applies here: rhythm and timing. Each strike must land at the optimal moment with exact force. Too soft, it bounces off. Too hard, you overcommit and expose yourself. Language works identically. Watch how masters modulate intensity. That's incorrect for minor errors. That's dangerously wrong for critical failures. That's catastrophically misguided for existential threats. Each calibrated to the situation, each creating the exact impact intended. Precision also means understanding connotation versus denotation. Cheap and affordable might seem similar. They're not. Cheap suggests poor quality. Affordable suggests smart value. Aggressive timeline versus ambitious timeline. Risky approach versus bold approach. The master chooses words that shape perception while remaining truthful. But here's the sophisticated layer. Precision isn't just about the words you use. It's about the words you force others to use. Do you think this strategy will work? Versus, on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you that this strategy will achieve our Q3 revenue targets? The second question demands precision in return. No vague reassurances, no weasel words, numerical commitment. Now you have leverage. This is verbal jujitsu, using their own words as weapons against weak positions. You said you were 8 out of 10 confident. We're at 30% of target with 6 weeks remaining. Help me understand the gap. They can't escape. Their own precision trapped them. Master precise language. Become untouchable. Chapter 4. The offensive question. Questions seem harmless, curious, non-threatening. They're not. In the hands of a master, questions are the most devastating weapon in verbal warfare. Because questions control attention, direction, the entire mental landscape of combat. The samurai understood that the warrior who asks the right questions at the right time forces the opponent into impossible positions. Watch. Why did you choose this approach? Defensive question puts them in explaining mode. Versus, what specific outcomes did this approach achieve that alternative methods wouldn't have? Offensive question demands justification they can't provide. End quote. The second question assumes the approach needs defending, forces them to prove value, shifts burden of proof entirely onto them. This is the fourth law of verbal war. He who asks the questions controls the frame. Most men answer questions. Masters redirect them. Why hasn't your team hit targets? Amateur response. Well, we've had some challenges with. Master response. Before I answer that, what's your understanding of the resource constraints we've been operating under? See what happened? He didn't refuse to answer. He reframed the conversation by asking his own question first. Now the other person has to reveal their knowledge level, their assumptions, their bias, all before he's committed to any position. Strategic questioning follows a pattern. First, diagnostic questions that map the territory. What's your current understanding of this situation? Second, exposure questions that reveal weak thinking. What evidence supports that conclusion? Third, deconstruction questions that dismantle their position. If that's true, how do you explain these contradictory results? Fourth, reconstruction questions that build your alternative. What would need to be different for a better outcome? Each question advances your position while forcing them to defend theirs. But the most powerful questions don't ask for information. They force recognition. Is that really the standard you want to be held to? Do you honestly believe that approach scales? Would you accept this result if someone else delivered it? These questions don't need answers. They create cognitive dissonance, make people confront the gap between their words and reality. The master also uses questions to preempt attacks. Before they can criticize your proposal, what specific concerns should we address before moving forward? You've just forced them to reveal their ammunition before they can use it effectively. Now, you can diffuse each concern systematically. Here's the sophisticated move. the question that contains the answer. Given that we've tried this approach 3 times with identical failures, what makes this iteration different? You didn't state the conclusion. You made them walk themselves to it. More powerful than assertion. Because they convinced themselves, advanced practitioners use layered questions that create inescapable logic. Do you agree quality matters? Yes. And that our brand depends on consistent quality? Yes. Then how does cutting QA time by 40% serve our brand? Trap sprung, using their own agreements against their position. But beware the dark side. Questions can be manipulative, dishonest. When you ask questions you already know the answers to, purely to embarrass, you're not engaging in verbal war. You're being a bully. The ethical master asks questions that genuinely seek truth, even when that truth advances his position. The difference matters. One builds respect, the other builds resentment. Master the offensive question. Control every conversation. Chapter 5. Reading the Invisible Battlefield. The greatest swordsmen didn't just master the blade. They mastered Zanshin remaining awareness, seeing what others missed, reading intention before action. Verbal warfare demands identical skills. Most men focus on words. Masters read everything else. The executive who says, "I'm open to discussion," while his arms cross and jaw tightens, he's not open, he's defending. The colleague who claims, "That's an interesting idea," while her eyes scan the door, she's planning escape, not engagement. The negotiator who insists, "This is our final offer," while his breathing shallows and hands fidget, he has room to move. Body language doesn't lie. Words do. This is the 5th law of verbal war. Trust actions over words. Trust the body over the mouth. The master reads 3 layers simultaneously. Verbal content, what they say. Paraverbal communication, how they say it. Tone, pace, volume. Nonverbal signals, what their body reveals. When all 3 align, trust it. When they conflict, the nonverbal truth dominates. Watch for these tells. Confidence, steady eye contact, open posture, gestures that match words, consistent vocal tone. Deception, micro-expressions of contempt or fear, excessive detail in explanations, hand covering mouth, defensive postures. 1. 12. Weakness, tentative language, rising inflection on statements, physical retreat, pacifying, gestures like neck touching. Aggression, forward lean narrowed eyes, finger pointing, shortened breath, tightened jaw. Each signal provides intelligence. The person who breaks eye contact when discussing timelines? They're unsure about meeting them. The one who touches their neck when presenting budget numbers? Those numbers are questionable. The executive whose voice speeds up when asked about team performance? There's a problem they're minimizing. Professional poker players master this. They're not reading cards, they're reading humans. The slight shoulder tension before a bluff, the pupil dilation before a strong hand, the swallow before a significant bet. Every body broadcasts truth. Most people aren't listening. But here's the advanced play. Once you can read others, you control what you broadcast. Conscious calibration of your own signals. Maintain steady eye contact to project confidence, even when uncertain. Keep hands visible and gestures open. Signals honesty. Match breathing to the rhythm you want to create. Slow and deep for calm. Faster for urgency. Control vocal tone regardless of emotional state. Steady voice signals steady mind. This isn't manipulation. It's professionalism. You don't let your face reveal your hand in poker. You don't let your body reveal your doubts in negotiation. The samurai called this Fudoshin immovable mind, emotional equilibrium regardless of circumstance. Your opponent insults you. Your face remains neutral. Your voice stays level. This unshakability is more intimidating than any counterattack because it signals nothing you do affects me. Strategic reading also means recognizing patterns over time. The colleague who always deflects when asked about progress, habitual avoider. Prepare accordingly. The client who consistently demands revisions at the 11th hour, control freak. Build buffer time. 10, 10, 10. The manager who praises publicly but criticizes privately, political operator. Manage the relationship strategically. Patterns predict behavior. Behavior determines outcomes. But the highest level of reading is perceiving what's not present. The critical stakeholder who's silent during the discussion. Why? The expected objection that never comes. What changed? The standard question they didn't ask. What do they already know? Absence speaks as loudly as presence. For those listening, master invisible reading. Win before speaking begins. Chapter 6. Tactical Aggression versus Strategic Violence. The samurai distinguished between two types of combat. Tactical engagement controlled, purposeful, measured, and kiai, the explosive spirit shout that shatters opponent composure. Both have their place. Knowing which to deploy determines mastery. Most men exist at one extreme. Either they're always aggressive, exhausting, predictable, ultimately ineffective, or they're never aggressive, weak, exploitable, perpetually overlooked. The master calibrates. Tactical aggression is controlled force applied precisely. That analysis is incomplete. Here's what you missed. Direct, critical, but factual. Strategic violence is overwhelming force that ends resistance. This analysis is so fundamentally flawed that continuing this discussion wastes everyone's time. We're starting over with someone competent. Nuclear option, relationship altering, deployed rarely. This is the sixth law of verbal war. Aggression must be earned, not automatic. Save your violence for moments that matter. When you're always aggressive, people tune you out. Develop immunity. Prepare counter strategies. When you're measured 95% of the time, that 5% explosion has devastating impact because they've never seen it before. The question isn't, should I be aggressive? It's, does this situation warrant escalation? Run the calculation. Is the issue genuinely critical? Will it compound if not addressed? Have softer approaches failed? Can the relationship survive the escalation? And if yes to all four, escalate. If no to any, maintain control. Tactical aggression tools. Direct contradiction? That's incorrect. Not, I'm not sure I agree. Evidence presentation. The data shows exactly the opposite of your claim. Consequence preview. If we proceed this way, we'll face these specific outcomes. Demand for precision. Define what you mean by soon in measurable terms. Each maintains professional boundaries while refusing to accept weak thinking. Strategic violence tools use sparingly. Public exposure. Everyone in this room knows that's false. Why are you saying it? Authority challenge. What qualifies you to make that decision? Relationship termination. This conversation is over. We'll resume when you're prepared to be serious. Ultimatum delivery. Here's what happens next. Either X or I. Walk. Choose. Each burns bridges. Sometimes that's necessary. The master recognizes when bridges need burning. The client who chronically disrespects boundaries. The colleague who sabotages projects. The partner who violates trust. Some relationships end. Violence makes the ending clean. But here's the sophisticated understanding. The threat of violence is often more powerful than violence itself. When people know you can escalate but choose not to, they respect the restraint. They understand he's being professional by choice, not inability. This creates a dynamic where others police themselves. They don't want to see what happens if you stop being patient. This is Katsujinkan, the life-giving sword, the blade that never needs to cut because its presence prevents conflict. Versus Satsujinkan, the death-dealing sword, deployed only when all else fails. Master both. Deploy wisely. Chapter 7. The counter, offensive. Defense is failure. The samurai never blocked an attack if they could redirect it. Verbal warfare follows identical principles. When someone attacks your position, your instinct is to defend it. Wrong. Defense validates the attack, accepts their frame, puts you in reactive mode. The master counterattacks. This is the 7th law of verbal war. Never defend. Always reframe and redirect. Your strategy has failed 3 times. Amateur defense. Well, circumstances were different each time. Master counter. You're right that we've had 3 unsuccessful attempts, which means we now have 3 data points on what doesn't work. That's more information than you had when you opposed trying at all. Would you like to discuss what we've learned, or continue pretending failure isn't valuable? See the redirection? He accepted the criticism, then used it as ammunition, turned their attack into his advantage. This is Nagashi, flowing with the strike, redirecting energy rather than opposing it. You're over budget. Amateur. We had unexpected expenses. Master. Correct. We're 12% over initial budget because we discovered 3 critical issues that would have cost us 40% to fix post-launch. Would you prefer we'd stayed on budget and delivered a broken product? The counterattack transforms defense into offense. Now they're defending their position, not you defending yours. Advanced counteroffensive techniques. The redirect. That's not the right question. Then reframe to your question. The elevation. We're debating tactics when we haven't agreed on strategy. Then shift to higher ground where you're stronger. The expansion. This issue is actually part of a larger pattern. Then reframe narrow criticism into broad discussion where you control context. The historical. We've tried your approach before. Here's what happened. Then use past failures as evidence. The consequences. If we do what you're suggesting, here's the result. Then paint a picture of their failure. The alternative. Your criticism is valid. Here's the solution. Then present your agenda as the fix to their concern. Each technique shares one principle. Accept enough truth to avoid seeming defensive. Then immediately seize control. The sophisticated counterattack doesn't feel like an attack. It feels like collaboration. You're absolutely right that we need to address this. Here's how. They think you're agreeing. You're actually redirecting. By the time they realize what happened, you've already won. But beware the over-counter. If you counterattack every criticism, you seem defensive, incapable of accepting feedback. Sometimes the master simply accepts. You're right, I missed that. Thank you. This isn't weakness, it's strength. Because it makes your counterattacks more credible when you do deploy them. People trust criticism from those who also accept it. The pattern. Accept minor criticisms gracefully. Counterattack major ones devastatingly. Never defend. This creates a dynamic where critics hesitate. If I go after him on something trivial, he'll accept it. If I go after him on something major, he'll eviscerate my position. Maybe I should reconsider attacking at all. Perfect. Master the counteroffensive. Never retreat again. Chapter 8. Weaponized Respect. The deadliest opponents are those you cannot hate. The samurai understood this. Bushido demanded respect for enemies, not from weakness, from strategy. When you respect someone while destroying their argument, they cannot claim foul. This is the 8th law of verbal war. Separate the person from the position. Attack the latter. Respect the former. That's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. This creates an enemy, guarantees resistance, damages your effectiveness. I respect your intent here, but this approach has 3 critical flaws that will guarantee failure. Let me explain. This dismantles the idea while maintaining the relationship. Same outcome. 0. Resentment. Weaponized respect means acknowledging their expertise before contradicting their conclusion. You've been doing this longer than anyone here, which is why I'm surprised by this recommendation. The data suggests a completely different approach, validating their concern before rejecting their solution. You're absolutely right that speed matters, which is precisely why this rushed timeline guarantees failure. Let me show you the math. Crediting their intelligence before exposing their error. You're too smart to actually believe this will work. So I'm assuming you haven't seen these numbers yet. Each statement respects the person while destroying the position. This is psychologically sophisticated. When you attack someone personally, their brain shifts into threat mode. Logic shuts down. Defensiveness activates. They stop hearing. When you respect them while challenging their ideas, their brain stays open. They can actually process your logic. More importantly, observers see you as fair, reasonable, professional. While your opponent looks emotional or wrong, you win twice: the argument and the room. The master also uses respect as precision targeting. I value your opinion, which is why I need you to reconsider this position. You're better than this argument. This statement implies, you're wrong, but I know you're smart enough to see it if you just think harder. Flattering and devastating simultaneously. Here's the advanced play. Use their respect for you against weak positions. You trust my judgment, correct? Yes. Then trust me when I tell you this approach will fail. You've just leveraged relationship capital to bypass objections. But, and this is critical, weaponized respect must be genuine. If you fake it, people smell the manipulation, and you become untrustworthy. True respect for opponents, even while defeating them, is rare, powerful, and, ultimately, more effective than contempt. The samurai concept, Katsujinkan, the life-giving sword that cuts without killing, the warrior who defeats without humiliating, who wins while maintaining honor. This creates an interesting dynamic. The opponents you respect become allies, because you didn't make winning require their destruction. You disagreed, you won, but you left their dignity intact. Now they can work with you, even support you, because losing to you didn't cost them face. This is long-term thinking. The argument you win today may require that person's support tomorrow. Destroy the person, lose the future. Destroy the argument, keep options open. Professional, strategic, and surprisingly more devastating than personal attacks. Because when you respect someone while dismantling their position, they have no defense. They can't claim you're being unfair, can't call you unprofessional, can't paint you as the villain. They can only accept defeat, gracefully. Master weaponized respect. Win without creating enemies. Chapter 9. The Endgame. Every conversation has an ending. The master controls when and how it arrives. Most men let conversations drift, fizzle out, conclude ambiguously. This is failure. Ambiguous endings mean ambiguous outcomes. No commitment, no action, no victory. The 9th law of verbal war. Define victory conditions before engaging. Secure commitment before disengaging. Before the conversation starts, know your endgame. What specific commitment do you need? What action must they take? What acknowledgement secures victory? What alternative is acceptable? Without clarity, you're just talking. The endgame has 3 components. Summary. Establish shared reality. Commitment. Secure specific action. Consequences. Clarify what happens next. Watch the pattern. Let me make sure we're aligned. You've agreed that current approach isn't sustainable, that we need to implement changes by Q3, and that you'll present the proposal to leadership by Friday. Correct? This forces them to either confirm or clarify. No ambiguity. Then, so I'll expect the proposal Friday, and we'll meet Monday to discuss leadership feedback. If there are obstacles to that timeline, I need to know now, not Friday afternoon. Clear expectations. Clear consequences. They cannot later claim confusion. You've eliminated that option. Advanced endgame techniques. The binary choice. So we're doing A or B. Which one? Forces decision. No waffling. The deadline lock. I need your answer by 5 p.m. tomorrow. After that, we're proceeding without your input. Creates urgency. Prevents indefinite delay. The assumption close. Great. I'll have my team start implementation Monday. You didn't ask permission. You stated intention. They must actively object or it's happening. The public commitment. Excellent. I'll send a summary email to everyone here confirming what we've agreed. Now, backing out requires public reversal. Most won't. The escalation preview. If we can't resolve this today, I'm taking it to higher authority tomorrow. I'd prefer we handle it ourselves. Gives them motivation to conclude. Creates shared interest in closure. But here's the sophisticated move. The master makes opponents believe the endgame was their idea. What would you need to see to feel comfortable moving forward? They state their conditions. You meet them. Now they're committed by their own criteria. They cannot later object. You gave them exactly what they asked for. The endgame also requires reading when to conclude. Push too far beyond victory, you risk reversal. Stop too early, you leave opportunity on the table. Watch for signals. They're repeating themselves? Time to close. They're asking logistical questions? Commitment is forming. They're leaning forward? Ready to conclude. They're looking at exits? Push harder or lose them. When you detect readiness, close immediately. Sounds like we're ready to move forward. When can you start? Don't keep selling after they've bought. That creates buyer's remorse. Failed endgames happen when you don't ask for commitment, assuming agreement that doesn't exist. You accept vague promises. We'll look into that means nothing. You let them delay. Let me think about it. Often means I'm hoping you forget. You conclude without documentation. Unwritten agreements disappear. The professional endgame creates accountability. I'm documenting our agreement and sending it to you within an hour. Review it and confirm or send changes by end of day. Now, there's a record, a timeline, mutual obligation. Master the endgame. Convert conversations to outcomes. Chapter 10. Integration. Becoming the master. Knowledge without application is entertainment. You've learned the principles. Now, you must become them. The samurai didn't study the sword. They became swordsmen. Through 10,000 repetitions, each strike perfected, each principle internalized, until technique disappeared and only mastery remained. Your path is identical. Start with foundation. Frame control. Practice reframing every challenge you encounter, not just in verbal conflict, in all thinking. Strategic silence. In every conversation today, speak 30% less. Observe what happens. Precision language. Eliminate weak words from your vocabulary. Maybe, I think, possibly, delete them. Then layer combat skills. Offensive questioning. In your next disagreement, don't defend. Only ask questions. Force them to defend. Invisible reading. Watch one person today. Note every physical signal. Predict their decisions based on body language. Tactical aggression. Choose one situation this week to escalate intentionally. Measure the impact. Finally, master advanced integration. Weaponized respect. Dismantle someone's argument while making them feel valued. Then, watch them thank you. The endgame. Walk into your next important conversation knowing exactly how you want it to end. Then, engineer that outcome. This isn't theory, it's practice. Daily, deliberate, disciplined. The samurai trained every morning, not when convenient, every morning. You must do the same. Set specific practice objectives. Today I will reframe 3 challenges using frame control. This week I will ask instead of tell in every professional interaction. This month I will master reading one person completely, every signal, every pattern, every tell. Measurable, achievable, progressive. Document your progress. After important conversations, journal. What worked? What failed? What did I miss? What will I do differently next time? This self-awareness compounds. Each iteration improves on the last. Within 6 months, you'll be unrecognizable, not because you're pretending, because you've internalized mastery. The techniques become invisible, automatic, part of your natural communication. People won't see you using frame control. They'll just notice you always seem to set the agenda. They won't catch your offensive questions. They'll just wonder why they always end up defending their positions to you. They won't spot your endgame engineering. They'll just marvel at how you consistently secure commitments. This is Mushin no mind. Action without conscious thought. The highest level of mastery. But never forget the ethical foundation. This knowledge is power. Power demands responsibility. Use these skills to advance worthy causes, protect yourself and those you care about, cut through deception and confusion, create value through clarity, not to manipulate for selfish gain, dominate for ego satisfaction, deceive for advantage, harm for entertainment. The samurai bound their deadly skills with gi righteousness. Power without ethics is tyranny. Ethics without power is impotence. You must have both. The world needs men who can fight verbally, who can defend positions, who can cut through nonsense and establish truth. But it needs them to fight for something that matters. Your mastery is a tool. Choose worthy work. The final teaching. The greatest verbal warrior is not the one who wins every argument. It's the one who chooses which battles to fight. Hey-ho, the way of strategy teaches that the supreme victory is the battle avoided through superior positioning. You now have the skills to dominate any verbal conflict. Use them to make conflict unnecessary. When people know you can destroy their position, they're more careful about opposing you. When they respect your competence, they seek your input rather than fighting your conclusions. When they understand you operate from principle, they trust your judgment. This is the ultimate endgame. Not winning every fight, making most fights irrelevant through demonstrated mastery. You've learned the art of verbal war. Now go forth and make war unnecessary. Through strength, through precision, through unwavering commitment to truth. The conversation continues. In every interaction, every negotiation, every relationship, make each one count.